Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're going to be revisiting the r/NoSleep subreddit. This first one here is written by Coney Island Queen, and it is titled, Don't Let Them In. This is a good one, so get cozy and let's get into it. Addiction took our mother slowly, rocked her through it, and sung her to sleep, sunk deep into the mattress on her bed. When her back teeth fell out, she left them on the side of the bathtub. I was 7, and I kept them in a matchbox. The missing pieces of her, kept safe, so that she wouldn't be lost forever. So maybe one day we could put her back together. Our house fell down around us, and we tried our best to raise ourselves. The ceilings had water damage, and the bottom stairs had dry rot, and in the winters, the radiators would bleed rust. But it was still our house, and Annie made it a home. My sister Annie mothered me, with lopsided band-aids on bruised knees and lukewarm microwave meals. She told me ghost stories, and I didn't mind when I crawled into her bed later on, too scared to sleep alone. She taught me to dance, barefoot on the living room carpet, music channel on full volume on the TV, shaking our hips before they were fully grown. She always let me shower first so the water was hot, never complaining when she had to make do with cold. She brushed my hair every day before school, even when I screamed and hit her when she caught the tangles. Annie was dark-haired like her father, whoever he had been, but I was blonde. Annie was desperate to be blonde too, like Marilyn Monroe, like Mom. I think she thought it would make them closer, remind Mom less of her dad. I'd give anything for her to have her hands in my hair one more time, even if it hurt. She moved to New York when I turned 18, and she never came back. I still dream about her sometimes. Keeping up with our mother was impossible, and we learned from a young age we would always be left behind. It didn't make it any easier. When she was drinking light, she shone, would wake us up at 3 a.m. with pancakes, dripping in cherry syrup. Sometimes when the weather was right and she'd had enough being drunk alone, she would call up our school and tell them we had both come down with summer sickness, and we would drive to the beach instead. I remember being 9 years old, in the backseat of the car, coming home after one of our ocean days, sucking the salt from my fingers. Annie had just dyed her hair blonde, her best friend Jane helping her bend over our kitchen sink. From behind, I couldn't tell who was mother and who was daughter. Radio up and windows down, blowing the sky inside. When she was drinking heavy, she'd be up all night, hair piled up like a beauty queen, eyes glazed over and ringed with glitter and black. Sometimes she'd be gone a day or two. She would never tell us when. One day we'd just wake up to an empty house and the fridge packed full. Post-it note on the front with a smear of Mom's lipstick in the outline of a kiss, telling us she would be back soon. Sometimes she'd bring guys home, filling the table with beer cans and ashtrays, smoke up to the ceiling, Mom lost in the haze. We would sleep with pillows over our heads, trying to drown out the music they would blast until the a.m., and wake up to strangers at our kitchen table in the morning, asking us where we kept coffee. When Mom drank too little, she fell apart. She wouldn't buy food, refrigerator a gaping hole in the wall. She would chain smoke, leaving cigarette burns on the wallpaper, up by the stairs like the walls were sick and decaying. She barely slept, walking around with blue half moons under her eyes, knuckles raw. She would scream at the slightest thing. I remember once when I spilled a glass of juice on the couch, she looked over at me with dead eyes and dragged me off onto the carpet and then took every single cushion off of the couch and into the backyard and set them on fire. Annie went to watch a while from the window and then sat next to me on the floor, backs pressed against the skeleton of the seats, head resting in the crater of my collarbones. When Mom drank too much, she was the worst. She would laugh out loud and too long at anything and everything, until her mouth started to shake and she started crying at the breakfast table into her cereal. Annie shut down when Mom was like this, went somewhere deep inside of herself where nobody could hurt her. She would stay up in the morning watching old black and white movies on TV, whispering the lines she knew by heart like prayers. When I was 5, I would cry when I'd find Mom passed out cold on her bed, sure that she would never wake up. Annie would wipe my tears, tell me she was only sleeping, just like the princesses in my storybook. We would sit on Mom's bed together and wait for her to wake up. When we were older, I was the one who would pick Mom up off of the bathroom floor again and again, and Annie would put her to bed, smoothing her hair off of her face and vomit from her mouth, changing her clothes if she had pissed herself. Watching them then, There was no doubt that Annie was the mother now. It was October, and I was 13. Annie was 16. It was a Wednesday night, and Mom had been gone for 2 days. She had called us that morning from a payphone, a voice slurring down the line, telling us she was having the best time with all of her new friends, and she hoped that we were doing fine. When she asked me if I was having a good birthday, I hung up on her. My birthday had been the day before. Annie had given me a pile of presents, strawberry lip glosses, and glittery nail polishes. I didn't ask where she had got the money from. I didn't care. We had taken the bus to the beach with Jane, eaten the birthday cake she had made for me, sand getting into the frosting. It tasted like sweetness and the sea, and I savored every bite and scrape of sugar against my teeth. We watched the sun go down, Annie snapping grainy photos on her shitty Nokia as I blew out my candles, wishing over and over that Mom wouldn't come home, that she would just stay gone this time. But that Wednesday night, me and Annie weren't speaking. Anger hung heavy between us, seeping through the floorboards. It began when she tripped at the bottom of the stairs. We had both laughed, Annie throwing her head back, gap between her front teeth catching the light. When I'd bent to pick her up, I'd caught her breath, warm against the freckles on my cheeks. I let go of her arms and she fell again, hitting the floor and grinning, shaking her hair from her face. Her breath was heavy with whiskey. I couldn't start picking her up too, couldn't watch her fall again and again. Just like Mom, I knew that she would never get back up. I'd stared down on her, blonde hair fallen into her eyes, and all I could see was our mother, and then I was running, feet slamming the hallway like heartbeats turned loose. I would run for the kitchen and tipped every bottle we had down the sink, shoving Annie back as she fought to stop me, catching liquor on her fingers as it fell. She grabbed my shoulders and made me drop the very last bottle. I smashed it between us on the floor, glass shards shining like we'd dragged the stars out of the sky and broken them, pieces we could never put back. Outside, through the open windows, the sky turned pale gold. Clouds, a mess of pink and cream, smeared across the horizon. I cried then, watching Annie on her knees picking up the pieces. That was Annie, always trying to fix things, even when it was too late. The smell of food dragged me from my room, stomach turning traitor inside my ribcage. Annie was cooking pasta, real food not made in a microwave. She had set the table, Tammy Wynette singing softly from the CD player. Annie gently swaying her hips as she stirred the tomato sauce, rich and warm. As we ate in silence, with every bite I forgave her. Mom never cooked dinner, or remembered my favorite spaghetti ever since I was a kid, or stayed sober long enough to sit up at a table. Annie wasn't Mom. We were washing the dishes when we first heard it. A moth was crawling down the inside of the pane, and I cracked the window to let it out into the dark. From the backyard came a faint sound. I tilted my head to listen, as it was coming from far off, crying. I figured it was Mika, the 2-year-old next door having a tantrum loud enough for us to catch, or maybe even Lucky Strike, the junky cat down the street, begging for food like he sometimes did. I always wanted to feed him when they came around, winding over my ankles, but Annie always stopped me, saying once you started giving, they never stopped taking. Looking back, I don't think she was talking about the cat. Annie switched on the Christmas lights, strung up around the porch, and we sat on the plastic beach chairs, watching the skies. When we were little, we'd sit outside and Annie would tell me the names of all the constellations and stories of how they came to be hung up in the night sky. I had to grow up before I realized that she made them all up as she went along. It was a game we still like to play now, making up ridiculous stories for the shape we could pick out. Ah yes, that one up there is the Coors Light. It got there when God dropped it out of his convertible window and never picked it up, she said, nodding sagely and hiding her smile. Of course, I said, waving my hands and pointing up past the power lines. Right next to the ashtray, left there by angels on a smoke break. Yeah, they say if you wish on it, all your dreams will come true, said Annie, grinning. She stopped laughing, voice quieter, tilted up to all those dead stars. Let's wish, Emmy. Let's wish. So we did. The sound of crying interrupted us. It was closer this time, and definitely human. We turned to each other, confused. Annie shrugged and I squinted out into the black. It sounded like a baby, lost, tired, and alone. It must be Mika, I said, slowly getting to my feet. Maybe he walked around the back. Shit, do you want to call Connie and tell them we'll bring him over? Annie didn't reply, and I sighed, rolling my eyes. I guess I'll do everything then. I stepped off the porch, grass soft against my heels. The air smelled like night rain, fresh and clean and growing. A promise unfulfilled. Annie's voice was strained. I turned to her, smiling. It died on my face when I saw the look on her own. Em, get inside, now. She was staring out into the dark, past me, opening the door with one hand behind her, fingers fumbling on the catch. I froze. Barefoot in the dirt, I had found what she was looking at. In the bushes, by the back of a fence, was a person, crouched with their knees tucked up neat under the chin, arms wrapped around their legs. Their mouth hung wide, softly opening and closing as he cried, like a child lost in the dark. Not like a child, but as someone pretending, mimicking the sound, opened and closed out into the blackness. Suddenly they straightened, snapping upright, face still hidden by the black. They were tall and thin, too thin to be a normal person. Panic made me move. Animal instincts left over from the days we lived up in the trees carrying me forward. I was faster than Annie, dragging her inside, slamming the door behind us, hearing it bounce on its hinges as we locked it. We watched as the person slowly walked towards the house, steps deliberate and long. Annie reached for my hand, holding me tight, and turned me to face her, holding my shoulders. Don't turn around, Emmy. Instinctively, I started to look over my shoulder, out into the darkness. Annie grabbed my face hard and shook her head. I knew then she was serious. Her voice cracked, and she cleared her throat, gripping my hand tight enough to hurt, nails digging in, grounding herself. I looked down at our fingers interlocked, both of us grown from the same bones. I'm gonna call the cops, and then everything is gonna be... Her voice faltered, stuttering. Tears spilled over her lashes, dripping like the promise of rain. Annie never cried. Your phone's on the porch, she whispered, and bile crawled its way up my throat. Her phone was upstairs, charging. A soft tapping filled the silence. Annie turned to the window, eye whites showing her eyes were so wide. It was the sound of someone's forehead against the glass, slowly, over and over. They started to speed up, faster and harder, skin meeting glass, until they were slamming into the window hard enough to shake the panes. The tapping stopped, and I was about to ask Annie if I could look now, when she screamed, followed by the sound of cracking glass and the loudest slam yet. Whoever was in our yard had just smashed their face hard enough into the window to break it. We ran upstairs, 2 at a time, skipping the ones caved in with dry rot on instinct. I turned behind me once, and Annie yanked my face back before I could see. The sound of broken glass echoed behind us as we made it into the bathroom, locking the door. A thin, wailing cry, like a baby calling for its mother, filled the hallway, trapped between the walls and locked doors. Annie threw her back against the door, feet jammed up against the bathtub, clutching the knife that she had grabbed from the kitchen. I did the same, shoulder to shoulder. Slow footsteps started on the stairs, deliberate and casual. The crying had become mocking, almost laughter, shrill bursts of sound and then giggles, high-pitched and abruptly stopping before starting again. The first door on the upstairs floor was my bedroom, and we heard the distinct sound of it slamming open. They were looking for us. What the fuck is going on? I asked Annie, not even bothering to brush away the tears that I couldn't stop falling. I watched my sister pick herself up off the floor and brace her hands on the door as we heard the sound of a second door slamming open. Mom's room. The next room on the hallway was the bathroom. Annie pulled me to my feet and she handed me the knife. I shook my head and pushed it back to her, terrified of what would happen if I had to use it. Annie shoved me and pressed the knife into my hands, thumb pressing hard enough on the blade to start bleeding. I watched my sister's blood drip down her wrists, a winding red road, still pushing into my hand despite the pain. I took the knife. Something slammed against the wall that my mom's room shared with the bathroom. A high-pitched wail followed. I held my breath. I could feel my heart beat in the base of my throat. A wild and frantic thing. I'm gonna get the phone from my room, Annie said. I shook my head violently, about to argue. Annie clamped a hand over my mouth. I could taste the blood on her hand, salty and sweet, like birthday cake by the ocean. Yes, I'm gonna get the phone, and I'm gonna call the cops, and we are going to be okay. I shook my head again. It's the only way. When I go, I need you to lock the door, and you don't open it for anything or anyone. Not for me, not for anyone. Promise me. I shook my head and Annie pressed her hand into my mouth, crushing my teeth against my lips so it made my eyes water. Yes, promise me, Em. Something smashed in the room next door. Annie brushed the hair off my face, gently tucking it behind my ear. Promise, she mouthed, and unlocked the door as slowly as possible. Bolt scraping gently, I watched the curve of her shoulder disappear into the black hall outside, like the moon in eclipse. And then she was gone. I couldn't move or breathe for a second. And then I slammed the bolt shut just as something bounced off the outside of the door. A high-pitched scream followed, handle rattling up and down hard enough to pop one of the screws. I watched it roll towards me on the tiles. And then silence. I sat with my back to the door, holding the knife and wishing I was holding Annie's hand instead. Still silence. Nothing but me and my lungs slowly filling the room with my breath.
Em?
Came a voice through the door. I started, hands gripping the knife.
Honey, what's going on?
Mom? My voice cracked. Mama, is that you? I wrapped my arms around myself, shaking, trying to keep myself still.
Sweetie, it's okay, just open the door. It's okay, just let me in.
The handle rattled again, gentler.
Just let me in, it's all okay.
She banged on the door, and I took my handle off the bolt.
Honey, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I missed your birthday. I'm sorry I'm such a terrible mother. Please.
Her voice broke, and she started to cry.
Just let me in, baby. I'm so sorry.
I screwed my eyes shut. She sounded so sad and so lost. I just wanted her to hold me, like when I was a kid and I'd come in off the swings with a scraped knee. Maybe this time she meant it. Maybe it would all be okay. My hand found its way to the bolt again. My sister's voice came in through the door, warm and gentle.
Yeah, Emily, just let us in. It's all okay.
My hand froze on the bolt and I tightened my grip on the knife. Annie never called me by my full name. A hand banged on the door, handle rattling.
Emily, let us in.
Annie's voice became low and guttural, followed by the same shrill giggles from before. Mom spoke now, pleading and crying, voice getting louder and louder, punctuated by her fists on the door. I thought about demons and monsters, all the bedtime stories we pray don't crawl out from under the bed. That's not my sister, and you are not my mother. I screamed through the door, hands over my head. I climbed into the bathtub and curled in a ball, cradling myself, knife clutched to my chest. I didn't know what it was outside that door, but I knew it wasn't Annie. It wasn't the voice that yelled at me when I changed the TV channel, the one that sang me happy birthday, the one that told me I was smart even when I got bad grades, the one that read me stories about princesses that never wake up. It wasn't human. Bangs and yells came from downstairs, followed by the footsteps of people running. A low, guttural howl ripped through the house, filling the room until I felt like I was drowning in the sound, and then the door was kicked in. I screamed, covering my eyes, waiting to die. Arms found me and lifted me from the tub, carrying me from the room. I looked at the outside of the door as I was carried downstairs. It was covered in long, scraping claw marks, dragged down to the floor. Pillows ripped apart, covered the hallway and soft down, like it had snow inside. I watched them drift slowly as men in uniforms checked each of the rooms that looked like they had been torn apart by something feral. Outside in our driveway were police cars and an ambulance. In the middle of it all was Annie, bathed in blue and red as it washed over her, lit up in the dark like a neon angel, face aglow. I threw myself from the cop's shoulder and ran to her, holding us both together. Broken pieces and all, standing under all these constellations we made up. Gentle screaming came from the ambulance, which rocked occasionally. Annie gently turned my head away, smiling so sadly it made my chest ache as I understood. Turns out there was no demon, no wild animal or bad men trying to break in. Just Mom, out of her mind on booze and drugs and everything in between, coming to the end of a week-long binge. Something had finally broken inside her head, and this time we couldn't put her back together, no matter how hard we tried. Sometimes you fall one last time, and you never get back up. Annie had seen her in the garden, blood dribbling from her mouth, track marks bulging on her forearms like unmapped roads, rail thin and desperate for one more hit, one more fix. She'd searched the kitchen for all the drinks that I'd thrown away, and when she hadn't found it, had come to hunt for the stash she hid in the bathroom. She hadn't wanted me, just the drugs on the other side of the door, so high she could mimic Annie's voice almost perfectly. It turns out that the real monsters are the ones that eat you alive slowly, the kind that come in a bottle, or a needle, or at the end of a long list of reasons why you can't get out of bed in the morning. Sometimes the monsters are the ones that raise you or love you the most, but it's up to you if you let them in. I'm personally a huge fan of that previous story. It has some cool messages, I think, like growing up with a parent that is struggling with alcohol and drug abuse. You know, it's a real issue, and I think this story portrays it really well. That was a long one, and I really enjoyed reading it for you guys. But in order to keep this video to a comfortable length, this next one is going to be a little bit shorter, but it's still really good, so I hope you guys are doing okay, and I hope you enjoy this next one. Let's get into it. My son's camera monitor alerted in the middle of the night. I checked it and saw my wife and son sitting on the bed. They weren't my wife and son. I'm a nurse and I currently work nights. It's a total drag, but I'm hopeful I can go to days soon since some coworkers are planning retirements. Anyways, I was working one night when, just after 3 a.m., my son's monitor alerted me to sound and movement. No big deal at all, he probably just coughed loudly or sneezed or something. He's 3 now, so he generally sleeps all night. I bring it up on my phone and I see him and my wife sitting on the bed. Again, no big deal. He might have cried out or gotten scared or something. I was about to close the app when I noticed that they were acting strange, almost creepy. And when I say almost creepy, I mean creepy as balls. They were sitting on the bed together, both of them just staring up at the camera with blank, emotionless stares. The night vision is black and white, so they had white, eerie-looking eyes. They didn't move at all aside from their visible breathing. They just sat there, staring at the camera. I close the app and give my wife a call to make sure everything is okay. I never got to call home on lunch, so in a way, this is a nice way to get to talk to my family while at work. It rings a couple times before she answers with a very groggy, "Hello?" It was like she was dead asleep when I called, but she looked wide awake on the camera. "Hey, you guys okay?" "Huh? Yeah, Buddy came in like 15 minutes ago. Seemed scared, so I said he could sleep with Mama." I'm confused here, since I saw them in his room a minute ago. Literally 60 seconds had passed since I closed the app and made the call. "Wait, so you guys are in bed?" "Yeah, I fell back asleep right away. Everything okay? Everybody keeps waking me up." She's kind of annoyed. "Hang on a sec." I put her on speaker and bring up the app, hoping I don't see it. When the app loads, I get that pang of intense nervousness in my stomach that I haven't had in a long time. Not since I was a kid, and I had realized while I was eating breakfast that a paper or something was due that day, and I hadn't done it. My heart leaps into my throat. My wife and son are sitting on his bed, looking up at the camera. Same emotionless stares. "Hello? You guys are in bed, right?" "Yeah, we're trying to sleep." "Well, I'm looking at his camera right now, and I see you two sitting on his bed." "Huh? No, we're in our bed." "I know that's what you mean, but I'm looking at his bed, and you two are in there." "Hang on," she says. She's quiet for a second while she brings up the camera on her phone. I hear this guttural, terrified gasp, like she had sucked all the air in from the room into her lungs, filling them to capacity. I don't hear this kind of gasp from my wife often. Usually only when she's truly afraid, like during a jump scare in a movie, or one time when she turned her back on our son for literally a second and he was down by the mailbox inches from the road. I hear rustling of sheets and the line goes dead. Of course, now I'm absolutely terrified, so I immediately call back. It goes to voicemail, so I call again. I call again and again with no answer. Finally, after about 4 minutes, she calls me. I tell you that 4 minutes felt like 40 years. "Hey, what's happening?" I ask. She's absolutely hysterical and crying, and I can't understand a word that she says. "Stop, just slow down for a second," I say. She slows down enough to explain that they're in the car and driving to her parents'. She looked at the camera, and when she saw what was on it, she got up and grabbed our son and rushed downstairs and out the door, didn't even close the garage. "Don't worry about it," I said. "I'll drive by when I get off and close it." We live in a generally safe neighborhood, so I'm not too concerned about the door being open. "You will not go in there," she says. "Hell no," I return. "Why are we on the camera? Is it a recording?" she asked. "I don't know," I returned. "I'm gonna keep watching it to see if there's anything I can tell. Do our code words with Buddy." We have code words because we're nerds. We've seen too many pod people and imposter movies, so we decided a long time ago to make code words with each other to be able to tell if one of us was an imposter. We have a couple code words, but we also have a 3-sentence story that we recite together. each saying a different part alternately of each other. I hear her on the phone saying the things we taught our son. He giggles as he says them, like he does every time we practice, since he thinks they're a joke and doesn't have any idea what the real meaning is. We're both convinced he's our son. My wife then says our part, and I'm convinced she's her. We made up these words as a complete joke to ourselves. I never once in my life ever imagined we'd actually use them. Unreal. She got to her parents safely, and it was hard to hang up. I told her we'll figure it out in the morning. Hopefully it was just a glitch. She said she didn't think it was a glitch. When she was running out, she had to run by our son's room, and the door was open. There's a little flashing light on the back of the camera that indicates it's connected to the internet. It gives off just enough light that when she ran by, she thought she saw, out of the corner of her eye, a shadowy outline of what could have been an adult sitting on our son's bed. It sends chills down my spine to think about. Knowing they were safe and out of the house is the only thing that kept me at work that night. It was a long 4 hours, but I kept checking the camera every chance I got. Sure enough, they were still sitting on the bed, staring up at the camera with emotionless gazes. There was no pattern to their blinking. It was erratic and random, just as a person blinking would be. The passing hours are what finally sealed the deal, that this was not a weird looped video of some kind. My son's window is visible on camera, and I can see that it is getting lighter outside his room. His curtains keep out just enough light to prevent the camera from exiting night vision, but lets in just enough to be able to tell that the sun is rising. I try to figure out what the hell I'm going to do before I leave work. Calling the police comes to my mind, but I talk myself out of it. First of all, what am I supposed to say? Someone is in my house that looks like my wife but isn't? Worse yet, what if they are entities of some kind, and the police do go over and it kills them or something? I decide to tell my coworker about it. He's a firm believer in the paranormal and might have a suggestion. I show him the video and tell him the story. His initial response of, "That's creepy as fuck," doesn't help much, but he says he wants to go over and check it out. He says we both should go to see if, not my wife, will try and act like my wife. I tell him absolutely not, and he says we should at least go to the house, even if we don't go in. I agree on that, since I wanted to close the garage anyways. We got to my house and walked around the perimeter first. Not sure what we wanted to accomplish by that, but it felt like something we should do. The curtains were all drawn, since nobody was there to open them in the morning, so we couldn't see anything. I went to close the garage, and suddenly I had this overwhelming urge to just go inside and investigate. It was like I just had to know what was going on. So, in we went. We walked through the kitchen, towards the foyer where the stairs are. It is so quiet in our house right now, you could hear a feather drop. Forget the pin. We stop at the bottom of the stairs and wait a few seconds. I look at the camera again, and they're still sitting there. I have never been so scared in my life. My coworker puts his foot on the first step, and I suddenly say, "Stop!" loudly. "Forget this. We're out of here." I tell him, "Come on." I start making my way back to the kitchen. We hear a loud creak in the floor from upstairs. It's my son's room. He has a very loud, creaky board right in the middle of his floor that's almost impossible not to step on. My wife and I are still deciding if we ever want to fix it, because it will alert us if he's ever up to no good when he gets older trying to sneak out or something. "Come on!" I yell as I motion for him to move his ass. We're out of the house in about 2 seconds. Out on the street, I check my phone. Now only not my son was sitting on the bed. Same blank stare, but not my wife was gone. "Holy shit," my coworker says. "That was stupid as fuck of us. Do not tell my wife we went inside. She would be so ungodly mad if she found out what we just did." I use my garage door opener in my car to close the door. Before we leave, I look at the camera again. Not my wife is back on the bed with not my son, both staring blankly up at the camera, blinking every few seconds. That was all about 4 days ago now. Not my wife and not my son are still sitting on the bed, staring up at the camera. They haven't moved a millimeter. We obviously haven't gone back to our house because of this. What do we do? Okay, so after being left on that cliffhanger myself, I realized that there's a part 2 to this story. I'm not gonna include that in this video, but if you guys really want to hear the next part, let me know in the comments and I will put it in the next video. Also, if you have any questions or concerns, or maybe even recommendations for stories that you'd like me to read, feel free to drop any of that in the comments below. Also, if you wanna, like and subscribe, you can do that too. Anyways, my name is Mesk, and until next time, don't talk to me.